My name is Sarwat Hussain and I work at the World Bank. We are located in Linwood, Pretoria. Thank you very much, Kevin, and thank you, Bridget, for having me here. It's a privilege to be here. I'm going to talk primarily about the Open Data Initiative, but also stray a little bit off track and go into a little bit on Wall Street, look at the larger agenda of how information fits into the overall development paradigm, and how that can be a tool of empowerment for you. These are momentous times in journalism, and I'm glad that Gus Silber talked about it yesterday and said there is no such thing as financial journalism. The way things are going, there might be no journalism if the UK is any indication of the future. And and with the shuttering of the World News, this is one of the most storied newspapers in British journalism history. It is sad that it's gone under, but journalistic practice is under the microscope. And therein, I think, there is the larger appeal to our ethical standing, which I think poses the larger threat. But I must be digressing, so I'm here to talk about how information can be an empowering tool, a tool for you to strengthen your stories, a tool that uses, or a tool that you can use to strengthen your arguments, because there's no better way to substantiate your stories than to have factual data, and factual data that is vetted by multiple institutions collaborating together. And we can, of course, put all of this to the test. And then, therefore, I think the overarching reason for this is to really talk about the quality of journalism. So without further ado, let me dive right into it. I thought I would just focus on why information matters from the perspective of the World Bank, why knowledge and information, why these are the new levers of sustainable development. Talk about the Open Data Initiative, and really knowledge as a tool of empowerment. But I thought I would begin by giving you the example of one of the most foremost proponents of globalization and so forth, Joe Stiglitz. He and Michael Spence, who you might recall chaired the prestigious Growth Commission 3 years ago. These were the guys who received the Nobel Prize. Well, they talked about asymmetries of information. And what I mean by asymmetries of information is basically inequity in access to information. And in our work, we find that there is the poor are both unwitting victims of asymmetry of information, and their lives are impacted when access to information is unequal. Without going much into the detail, I mean, Joe Stiglitz's work and Michael Spence's and George Akerlof's work looked at these asymmetries of information and why these matter. But I thought I would pop you a pop quiz. Does this picture mean anything to you? Somebody just said the other guy looks like me, so this is not a punch for me. Okay. Let me just tell you, information matters even on Wall Street. These two guys, the one in front is Preet Bharara, who is the New York State upstate prosecutor. And the guy behind is Rajaratnam, a Sri Lankan, who was the manager of Galleon hedge funds. Now, these guys together have entered into history because they perpetuated, at least Rajaratnam perpetuated, the largest fraud in Wall Street history. Okay? At one time, his hedge fund spoke about, had a portfolio of 7 billion. Now, that's not chump change, right? And at that time, he was assessed as being worth 1.3 billion, and if it mattered, he was the 559th richest person in the world, right? He was convicted of 14 counts. The jury deliberated over 12 days. There's a riveting article in the New Yorker magazine talking about how the jury came to that determination. But for the first time in history, we have financial crime now being equated with the mafia, drug crime, and violence. Okay? So all I'm trying to do is paint this picture for you where financial journalism may well be on its knees, but information does matter. For the first time in history, they did a body wiretap of people who were meeting Rajaratnam, and there were 2,400 phone calls that were recorded, only 45 of which were enough to nail him with this 14 counts. So it also gives you a picture of how wide this thing was. Okay, so having got that wall, and by the way, I'll leave with Kevin a copy of my printout, and all of these references are sourced, so you can actually go back in and find them on the web. But coming back to, so in a sense, I've made the case about why information matters. The World Bank is not new to information. We used to, 10 years ago, we used to pride ourselves in being the knowledge bank. With a sense of immodesty, one can say the markets do respect World Bank data. For example, when I came here to work on the ESCOM project and there was some uncertainty about it, it was reflected in the RAND strength. It sank by 2%. So when these major loan decisions and so forth are taken, it does rattle the financial markets. Our first foray into this whole area of knowledge for development was in 1997 when we published our flagship report. It's the World Development Report, which comes out annually. And basically what we talked about in Knowledge for Development was that access to financial, technical, and medical knowledge is crucial to improving the lives of poor people. I say that because I've just come back, earlier I was in India, where a colleague of mine who got an Ashoka Prize is doing something very simple. She has a group of volunteers stationed at the most busy bus station in town, where buses come in from nearly 40 districts, and every now and then a busload of people, there are 2 or 3 people who are critically ill. They're coming in to seek medical attention, public services, but they have no clue what is ailing them. They do not know which hospital to go to, what doctors they need to see, because, again, information about public hospitals is very scarce, and it's not published. And yes, whatever is little is published on the Department of Health website is outdated. It's been overtaken by events. So that's this thing for why knowledge matters for development. We also have a new World Bank access to information policy, and that's the URL for it. And basically what that does is, and I have all of this at the end of the presentation, so you really don't need to take notes, but it's all there. This access to information policy basically was approved by the bank's board. The bank is an intergovernmental agency owned by 187 governments. South Africa is a shareholder. South Africa is represented on the board of the bank by one executive director, Dr. Renosi Mokate, who used to be deputy governor at the Reserve Bank. But coming back to the access to information policy, this is about when Judge Brandeis said, sunshine is the best disinfectant. When you shine the light of scrutiny, which is the absolute imperative of journalism, what you're doing is improving the chances for better development outcomes. And that I think should be the leitmotif of what I'm trying to say. This access to information policy is the first of its kind amongst development institutions of the multilateral kind, of which the World Bank is one. It draws on India's Right to Information Act and the United States Freedom of Information Act. And one of my colleagues, Minyane, if you can stand up, I'll introduce you. This is Minyane Siopusingwe, and she handles the Public Information Center of the World Bank, and she's actually does respond to all of the access to information requests that come in. And just so you know, the bank is not full of gray people, but also young people. But coming back to open development, basically what I'm talking about is, the open data platform is based on sharing tools, essential information on the global economy and the bank's operations. It is about open knowledge. It is about enabling researchers, students, local communities, and so forth, including journalists, to measure results and increase knowledge. And the whole idea is, of course, to work collaboratively to find solutions. In trying to make this pitch, I was absolutely struck by a Royal Society of UK report, where one of the papers that they published involved collaboration amongst 3,200 scientists. That's the nature of collaboration that is taking place in the world of science, right? It's our access to our open data initiative basically makes data freely available. It's easy to use and reuse. It's searchable. I don't know if many of you remember seeing An Inconvenient Truth and Hans Rosling's jumping graphs, right? All of that is now, you can recreate Hans's graphs on the World Bank website now. This basically says that, everything changed on April 20th last year when we announced this, because there were something to the effect of there were about 120,000 users that had exclusive access to World Bank data. When we threw open the doors, everything was put into the public domain. We have a new custom query tool. There are minimal restrictions. It's multilingual. It's searchable, and so forth. So the key URL for you is data.worldbank.org. That's what you just need to remember. It has by country indicators, by topic, and this just gives you an example of the education sector and so forth. But it's most importantly by country, so it enables you to drill down at the country level, and then if you wish to go further, you can drill down to sector level. And what I mean by sector level is you can look at health, you can look at energy, you can look at education, and so forth. And these are some of the topics, just to give you a broad picture. Okay. The former speaker was talking about debt, and these are some of the most sophisticated calculations that you can do as well. Look at issues of economic policy and how they impact external debt, and these are again by country and so forth. The indicators, again, just to give you, I've worked for a lifetime in agriculture. it is the major source of employment and food security and nutrition security across Africa. This data set has some of the most detailed statistics that are available in terms of, access to marketing facilities, roads, and so forth. So it's very powerful. There's also the thing on forest area, so for example. And the point about all of this data is that it assembles these data sets from about 7,000 indicators. So this is an amalgamation of all the various sources. There are at least about 21 institutions. There's a book called World Development Indicators that we publish every year, WDI, and it's a voluminous, it's about 500 pages. But that is the single most important source that we publish. But in order to save the trees, it's now available online. And the point about that is that it brings together data from 21 major institutions, including the United Nations system. As I said, you can do Hans Rosling's tricks, but you can also chart an indicator. And most importantly, what we did was, and I'll come to it later, is that we had a global competition for developing smartphone applications for this data. And guess what? It was no surprise. Most of the apps came from Africa, and nearly 30 of them that are all being at various stages of being implemented. It's multilingual. And basically what it does is if you drill down, you can actually look at various subsets of the data and so forth. Now, one of the things is that this is pretty intense stuff. You really have to roll up your sleeves and dive into it. But the fact is that if you were looking for very detailed information, it does exist. And most importantly, it is out in the public domain, which, we can have a later discussion about why knowledge is a public good. Again, without going into the thing, it has all of these, it's at the global, regional, and national level, as I said earlier. It has 40 plus data compilations. And as I said, this global application, this global competition that we had was for developing applications. And I think there was one guy from Australia who came up with, his app is called Stat Planet. And basically, this is one of the ones that is being piloted just now because it allows you to dive into all of this data and come up with your own simulations. But it, in a networked world, it just means that, the guy in Australia was able to just cobble things together. He understood the import of the data, and he developed this app, which is just remarkable. Yeah, my former speaker was talking about the hazards of personal card debt. The issues are also very serious when you come down to the countries. But the point is that some of these external applications are also in 34 languages. And I have something here that was not supposed to. Right. And as I said, we had this global apps for development campaign, and it awarded about 45,000 in prizes, and there were about nearly 1,500 supporters and lots of submissions from across the world. The apps are being submitted since I'm short on time, but here basically in this visual sort of in this graphic user interface, it just shows you. I've brought along, which I'll leave with Kevin, an article that appeared in the New York Times last week, and it's titled paper. All these things were supposed to get rid of paper. Yeah, this story is on July 2nd, and it's called World Bank is Opening Its Treasure Chest of Data. And this is a story about how, the average bank report can cost anywhere between $5 million, and how they sent a plane to do an aerial run over Haiti to look at, to take terrestrial pictures, and how nearly 600 engineers then were able to collaborate across the world using those data and using ground truthing from teams working on the ground, and come up with a construction plan that would be more resilient to earthquakes than what was existing. So I'll leave that with Kevin. But coming back, I mean, this is a little bit of this thing just to show you that this is what people were saying, the library journal, and so forth. Now, why all of this is important is because increasingly people are storing data. There's a new article out there's a new research study by McKinsey that says there's now enough information stored with people equivalent to something like 60,000 libraries of Congress. For the first time in human history, our ability to manipulate data and work on data is becoming a factor of production. Okay? How quickly countries are able to. Oh my goodness, I've got another story going on here. Okay, but, and as I was telling you about Hans Rosling, but the point about this is that now we're entering a new age where manipulating data is going to be of critical import. Okay, that's him, Robert Zelick, and basically, more of the same. I mean, getting users to the data quickly. You can track and share metrics in real time. There's on a lighter note, I must tell you, one of my colleagues is a guy who's on a single mission, and that is he wants everybody to be on bicycles in my office. That guy he's got on his South African phone, Kevin, an app that allows him to track his movements. And Marco was demonstrating to me that every time he rides his bike to the office, it measures all the central data and puts it on a site where there's a guy, his competitor in Washington, who's keeping tabs on how much of kcals he has spent, how quickly he was able to make the commute. And that guy there is then egging on others, including another guy in Spain, telling them that Marco is getting ahead of us because he's getting really nimble. and we need to make ourselves a lot more light, perhaps. But the point is that this is just a small indication of how global collaboration is changing. In real time, Marco parks his bike. As soon as he shuts off his app, that data is transmitted to the cloud. It's on the web, and his competitor in bicycling is seeing it in Washington. So there's a close rivalry going on there. The important thing about this is, and I think it also goes back to the whole thing of innovation and how new ideas and the fertility of ideas. When people collaborate, some of the most remarkable discoveries in human history have just come about because of collaboration. I mean, I could go on and on about stories and so forth, but the most archetypal one I have is of a professor, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar, who was a Nobel laureate and discoverer of the dark holes. He was such a maverick. He was ousted in India. He was ousted by Cambridge University, and he lands up at the University of Chicago, where it's biting cold. This guy has contracted TB. His wife is saying, "You're out of your mind. You've come to the coldest part of the planet. You're going to die." And then he takes another teaching appointment at the University of Wisconsin, where it's 9 months winter, and he goes and teaches 2 students. And these students come Tuesdays and Thursdays. And guess what? Both of those students receive Nobel Prizes. So that is the power of collaboration that I'm talking about.